So the topic today, though, is 6 important leadership skills that every executive needs to develop. I'll give you kind of an example of why this is important. When I first started the Leaders Institute, folks would ask me, they'd find out, I'd be at a meeting, a business meeting or something like that, and they would say, "Well, what is it that you do?" And it was kind of hard for me to answer that. I would say, well, I teach leadership skills to executives. And a lot of times I just get a blank stare back when they would look back at me. And sometimes the person would try to clarify and say something like, "Oh, so like time management stuff, right?" Or something like that. Anyway, of course, I mean, that wasn't exactly what I was doing. And what I realized was that different people have dramatically different definitions of what leadership skills actually are. So in fact, just for clarification, make sure to look at the soft skills, what are they episode that I did a couple of weeks ago. It kind of goes into great detail on that. But before I get into these 6 important leadership skills, let me kind of give you a definition of what they are. That way we're kind of all on the same page. So leadership skills really are, I call them the highest level of soft skill. These are skills that they're used to inspire others. They're used to create a vision for a new path, develop skills and confidence of the people around us. So basically leaders create paths that never existed previously. So they're starting something new and they're getting people to move in that direction. That's what makes them leaders, right? So these are the 6 skills, and I'll kind of go through each one of them in a little detail, and then we'll kind of recap them at the end. That way, it makes it a little bit easier. So number one is what I call innovation. So good leaders share an important common leadership skill, and that one thing that most of them have is that they're always looking for a better way to do something. Like I know, like my team gets absolutely frustrated with me because they think I'm never happy, right? It's like, we go and we do something, we create this great accomplishment, we have this fantastic breakthrough, and then we celebrate it for a couple of days, and then we dissect it and look for a way to make it even better. And so, because we're always when we look for ways to make the next generation better than what it is now, that's how we continue to grow. That's how we continue to stay on top and beat our competitors, right? So if you and your team are not doing this, especially in today's world, then you're likely getting left behind, because there's a good chance that some of your competitors are doing that without you. So if you're nostalgic, by the way, a fantastic example of this was in 2001 when Apple released the iPod. Steve Jobs and his team looked at ways to make the technology of playing music much easier. So if you were alive in the 1990s, right, you'll probably understand that was a really big breakthrough. The iPod was this really huge breakthrough, because I remember. I mean, I was younger then, so that was back when I still did jogging and stuff like that. In fact, it might have been the last time I actually did jogging. I jogged, so but I remember going out and having, I had a CD player with the headphones and everything, and I'd have to go to my CD collection, pick one of the CDs that I had that had enough songs, had 15 songs on it maybe. And one CD that had enough songs on it that I liked, because, since it only had 15 songs, not every one of those songs on the album were going to be fantastic. So you'd end up skipping through those things, which is kind of hard to do when you're running and that kind of thing. It also had these AAA batteries that they were the one battery that nobody ever had, so it was like stores and stuff. So they were always expensive and hard to get. So basically the iPod fixed all of these things. You could actually carry your entire music collection in your pocket. So, and then of course they didn't stop there. The iPod breakthrough actually led to the iPhone. And they made history, through basically this really cool leadership skill, which is innovation, taking something that is not as good as what we want it to be, and that we've gotten used to, and saying, okay, how can we make that better? How can we innovate? How can we do something different? So the second major leadership skill is collaboration. So when I first started out as a leadership coach or leadership consultant, many of the challenges that I helped my customers fix were dealt with collaboration. I'll give you a really good example. One early client was a truck dealership. And what they did was they built a competitive environment where the department heads received bonuses based on the profit of their individual department. Seems like a fantastic idea, by the way. I mean, survival of the fittest. You do a better job, you get rewarded for it, and especially in a competitive area like sales and stuff like that. So it should have worked, but when the department head increased revenue or decreased costs, then the bonus increased. So if they increase their revenue and decrease their costs, especially at the same time, then they got way bigger bonuses. However, after implementing this policy or these policies, the general manager saw that the growth of that specific location just slowed down to a crawl, and then eventually it started going backwards. They actually were shrinking in revenue. So the general manager was trying everything to get the location to grow, and nothing was working. So and in fact, months after he implemented this policy, that particular location began to lose revenue. So when he hired me to come in and say, "Hey, how can we fix this? What is something that we can do to fix this?" As I began to look more closely at the situation, I realized what the departments were actually doing, right? The departments really had absolutely no internal collaboration. They saw themselves as being individual managers on their own island and in control of their own domain. And they actually seemed pretty adversarial to each other. Yeah, they were cordial, and I mean they were good friends and everything, but it was as though they saw the other department heads as being competition for them. Like, for instance, the parts department would raise, if they couldn't really raise customer prices without losing business. So if a mechanic wanted to buy parts from the parts department, they couldn't just jack up the prices on those parts, because that mechanic would just go to a different dealership. They'd go somewhere else, or order them online, which was becoming more prevalent at that point. However, the service department at the actual dealership, they had to buy parts from the parts manager. So he did, right? So basically, so what he would do is he would increase the price to the service department of those parts, because the service manager couldn't do anything about it, had to buy the parts from him. And that's how he actually increased his bonus. So his bonus went up, service department numbers went down. So to compensate, the service department started to take a real hard line on warranty work for customers, right? So if it was even just an hour past the warranty expiration, you can't, nothing, right? They weren't going to help out. Or if it was something that typically they covered under warranty, they would start reading the fine print and say, no, this is one of those exceptions, you can't get it. So basically it was causing basically disgruntled customers took out their frustration on the salesperson who told them that, this warranty was going to be valid. So both sales and service numbers went down even further as a result of that. So that short-term bonus actually led to a downward spiral in revenue. And I suggested that the manager change the policy. And it was weird because he actually kept the bonuses, but he just tweaked it a little to where the bonus only kicked in if the month-over-month gross for revenue increased by at least 5%, or that's what I recall anyway. It could have been something different, but it was a specific number that was tied to it. And the entire organization had to reach that in order for any of the managers to get their bonus. So, and it worked like a charm. It was really effective. It basically changed the mentality now to being, it was still competitive, but it wasn't competitive against each other. They were being more collaborative with each other. And so as a result, since they all had the same common goal, they were working together to make sure that the organization was succeeding. And that's what leaders do. Leaders are able to kind of look at those policies, those procedures, those things that we're doing, and help their team really collaborate more and better. The third one is vision. This third leadership skill is vision. And if I had to pick one of the absolute most important leadership skills, I'd probably pick vision, because in order to create a path that doesn't exist, you first have to be able to see the path before anybody else does. By the way, I did some really cool research on as I was kind of preparing for the episode, and I started looking at Netflix, because Netflix is one of those companies that is really odd because they have revolutionized a number of different things as far as entertainment. They totally changed the entertainment industry. And if you grew up like I did with the red Netflix envelopes, you would use they would send the DVD in the mail and that kind of thing. But there's some folks that are listening to this going, what the heck are you talking about? Netflix is the online virtual thing, right? No, actually and they still, by the way, send out millions every month of the DVDs. I'm not sure who they're sending them to, but they still do that. You'll likely be surprised though to hear that Netflix actually set out to be a streaming service from the start, like the late 90s when they started up. Their whole goal was to be a streaming service, not a DVD service, not the red envelope company. And in fact, they created the circumstances, I think anyway, they created the circumstances for the demise of that DVD industry. And one of the articles that I read was in Variety, and it quoted the Netflix founder, Reed Hastings, and it basically he was talking about this vision that he laid out in 1999. This was like a decade almost before he was able to implement this vision, but he laid it out in pretty good detail. And so it took years for that vision to actually come true. But basically, this is kind of what he said back in 1999. He said, I'm going to read this. So this is, I typically don't like to read things, but it was just so cool that I'm going to read this to you. So he said, postage rates were going to keep going up, and the internet was going to get twice as fast at half the price every 18 months. So at some point, those lines would cross, and it would become more cost efficient to stream a movie rather than to mail a video. And that's when we get in. So basically, in 1999, he was saying that, hey, this is where the industry is going. We have to wait for technology to catch up and for postal prices to go up as well. And when it gets more expensive to send one of these things than it is to just download it, and it's easier, that's when we kind of jump in. And that's exactly what they did. It was like 2007, 2008, that time frame that they started doing their streaming service. And again, just like the Apple example earlier, kind of the rest is history. So the entertainment industry just kind of changed forever. So he laid out that path in such a clear way before anybody else could ever see it. And so that's what got people to kind of jump on board with him. He was able to acquire or to recruit really high level people to kind of join him on this mission because of that vision that he was laying out there. So the fourth skill is motivation. So when you think of motivational speeches, especially in movies or in history, there always seem to be two really distinct parts. I mean, lots of parts, but two that are in almost every single one. The first is that motivational leaders tend to set high standards. So they're setting those standards that when you hear that standard in the beginning, it's like, oh my God, I'm not sure I can do that. I'm not sure that's possible, right? But they set that standard that's really, really high. And then second, they're really optimistic. So they're going to encourage you to reach that high standard. So the combination of those two traits, really, it's contrary to what the average person does. So when people see these two traits in combination in a single person, they really recognize them. That's how that's how these motivational speakers, they get paid a lot of money to go on because they each one of them has each one of those two things. In fact, if you watch any motivational speaker, they're often going to tell you a story about how the odds were against them, and in that moment, there are really two choices that you have. You either give up, or you make your standards a little higher, and then you fight like heck to get to that higher standard. So motivation it's the important leadership skill that gets your team to move forward when everybody else is standing still. And by the way, I'm going to link to a video in the show notes. It was a motivational speaker. His name's Eric Thomas, and he spoke to the 2016 USA Olympic team just before they competed. And it is a really rousing speech. And basically, one of the things that he said over and over again was that when it gets hard, you want to think about three people who you love the most and use them as your inspiration, which we'll talk about later. And then repeat these words. He said, repeat these words over and over again as you're thinking about those people that kind of motivate and inspire you. You have to say things like, I can do this. I will do this. and I must do this. I've got no choice now, right? So he's basically using words as a way to help motivate somebody when times get tough, because they're gonna get tough, to keep going, to push on, to fight, to move forward instead of moving backwards, to move forward instead of staying still. And that's where motivation comes from. Those are very motivational words. So you can do the same thing with your folks. Be that motivational uplift in your organization, so that when times get tough, you're the person that they're relying on to help push them through, to charge forward in those tough times. So the fifth one is creativity. The fifth leadership skill that's really important is creativity. Creativity is really, it's that skill that you use to overcome the obstacle that has been placed in your path that the motivation is needed for, right? So you've got this vision of where you're going. However, somewhere along the way, the best laid plans will fall apart entirely. And at that point, you're going to want to give up. And then that's when the motivation will kick in, and you'll make the decision to move forward. So at this point, you're going to wonder, okay, so now I'm feeling good about moving forward. Yeah, I want to fight, but what the heck am I supposed to do now? Wait, we were not expecting this. This is something totally different than what was going on, than what we thought was going to go on. So what the heck do we do? And this is where creativity will get you to your goal. So, for example, we do hundreds of team building activities every year for companies really big and small, and our clients hire us because they may only organize, one big meeting every single year, their annual meeting or something like that. So it's real easy. If you're only doing this once a year, it's real easy for things to kind of fall through the cracks. So a lot of times they'll hire experts like my team to come in, because to make sure that glitches don't happen, so nothing falls through the cracks, because we do these things, 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. So we can pretty much, we can do them in our sleep. It's kind of like a muscle memory a lot of times. So, and in fact, how sometimes you'll arrive at your office and think, oh my God, how did I get here? That muscle memory has kind of kicked in, because you went on autopilot, going to the office. Well, I got a call from one of my most senior instructors a while back, and she started. It was funny because when she started the call, she said, "You are going to kill me," and I kind of laughed and said, "Hey, whatever it is, we can fix it," because I was using my motivational skills, right? And she said, she said, I flew to the client location to do one of our mini golf team building activities. So they basically, in that activity, they're making a miniature golf course in a banquet hall, which is kind of cool. It's a really neat kind of thing. By the way, they do it out of like food items, like macaroni and cheese boxes and stuff like that, then donate it to donate the food to charity after they're done playing with it. So I know that sounds really weird now that I've said that out loud, but it's really fun. But anyway, so she was fit. So she's continuing though. She said, however, on autopilot, I packed all of my bike building gear. The Build a Bike activity is our most popular charity team building activity, and it requires wrenches and screwdrivers and tools and stuff like that. So we have a little kit that we kind of take with us, and then when we're doing the golf course thing, we bring golf clubs and greens, the felt greens and golf course hole, golf, like mini golf holes and stuff like that, right? So totally different materials. So she said, I left all the golf stuff in my garage at home, 4 states away, and my event starts in about 18 hours. Luckily, she got there the day before. And inside, by the way, when she said this, I'm panicking, because that's why people hire us, to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen in their event. But I kind of calmly replied, hey, I think I told her, you're the best in the world at doing these things. And she is. I mean, she's really, really talented, really qualified. I said, you'll figure out how to fix it. And she did. And the client never knew that anything was wrong. And in fact, when I had her give a report on that, in the next sales briefing that we have, when all of our instructors and salespeople kind of get together, and she kind of told us some of the really creative things that she did to make it very professional and make it to where the client really didn't even know that this was different than what it really should be. So that's where the creativity will really kick in. And then the last one is really close to creativity. It's inspiration. You have to be inspirational to your people. And it's a little bit different though, because once you harness through the creativity in yourself, the final important leadership skill is to inspire creativity in others, right? So the word inspiration, comes from Greek mythology. The muses would inspire spontaneous creativity in artists, and a good leader is able to inspire creativity in his or her teams as well. So, for instance, back when COVID first hit, our instructors had a lot of downtime. And so many of our meeting contracts, that's what we do a lot of, had been postponed or they'd been canceled. So we figured that this would be a really, really good time to do a lot of those projects that we've really always wanted to do, but we were just too busy to do. So I encouraged the team to experiment with writing blog posts and recording podcasts and creating YouTube videos. And we actually use Zoom meetings to share ideas. And within 8 weeks or so of the time that the lockdown really started, was in full force, Candace, who's one of our lead instructors in Las Vegas, she'd actually written an entire book. It took her just a few weeks to write an entire book. And basically, in Las Vegas, the pandemic caused a huge number of changes in Las Vegas in general, but the biggest seemed to be in personnel. For instance, bartenders have, and some casinos have been replaced by machines. And so Candace actually wrote a book called Irrawaddy Reinvention. I'll link to that in the show notes. So you can you can purchase that if you want to. It's a really, really fun and interesting book about how to reinvent yourself if you've been forced to change careers, especially based on things that have happened recently. And so now she travels around the world helping companies help team members who have been downsized because of the pandemic. And she helps these people really identify their strengths and their skills so that they can use them in a totally different industry in a lot of cases. So the point is that I didn't come up with that idea. I just inspired her to get creative. So if you're an executive, basically you want to focus on building these really important leadership skills, and really to grow as a leader and to build a great team, you want to practice these things consistently. So the first thing is innovation. You have to be the leader to create the new path. Secondly, collaboration. You got to get cooperation from your team members and other people and get them to follow you. And then the third area is vision. Have that clear and specific picture of where you and your team are going. The next one is motivation, because it's going to get hard. And so you got to keep moving forward during the tough times. Creativity is, when those obstacles appear, look for ways to move around them, or in some cases, move through them. And then the last one, inspiration, lead your team to higher levels of creativity as well. And if you do those things, people are going to see you as a great, fantastic leader.